At exactly 02:17 hours on May 7, 2026, the skies above western Russia erupted into chaos. Air raid sirens screamed across Moscow, Belgorod, Kursk, and Bryansk as radar operators inside Russia's Aerospace Defense Command suddenly detected hundreds of fast-moving aerial contacts crossing the border simultaneously. What initially appeared to be another limited Ukrainian drone harassment raid quickly transformed into one of the largest coordinated aerial assaults since the beginning of the war. Within seconds, Russian S-400 batteries switched to combat mode. Pantsir S-1 air defense vehicles rolled out from concealed urban positions. Electronic warfare stations flooded the electromagnetic spectrum with high-powered jamming signals designed to blind incoming autonomous drones. But the scale of the attack was unlike anything Moscow expected. According to Russian military sources, more than 340 drones were detected moving toward critical military and industrial infrastructure across 20 separate regions. This was not random harassment. This was saturation warfare. The timing could not have been more dangerous. Only hours earlier, President Vladimir Putin had rejected Kiev's proposal for a broader ceasefire ahead of Russia's Victory Day celebrations. Ukraine responded immediately with what military analysts are now calling a strategic pressure operation designed to humiliate Moscow before its most symbolic military holiday. Inside Russia's National Defense Management Center, giant tactical displays began flashing red one after another as operators struggled to separate real targets from electronic ghosts generated by Ukrainian decoy drones. At the same time, Russian electronic warfare brigades activated Pol-21 and Krasuka jamming systems around Moscow's outer defensive ring. The objective was simple: break the GPS guidance of incoming drones before they reached strategic targets. But Ukraine had anticipated this. Many of the drones were reportedly flying pre-programmed terrain-following routes using optical navigation and inertial guidance systems, making them far more resistant to traditional electronic suppression. And that changed everything. At 02:31 hours, the first explosions shook the outskirts of Bryansk. Thermal surveillance satellites later detected fires spreading across a suspected logistics complex linked to Russian missile resupply operations. Seconds later, secondary detonations lit up the night sky, suggesting ammunition storage. Facilities had been hit directly. Then the attack escalated even further. Russian radar stations near Moscow suddenly reported low-altitude drone clusters approaching from multiple directions simultaneously. This was classic swarm fragmentation doctrine. Instead of one massive wave, the drones divided into smaller autonomous kill packages designed to overload localized air defenses. Inside the Moscow air defense sector, commanders realized they were facing a mathematical nightmare. Each Pantsir S-1 system could engage only a limited number of simultaneous targets. The drones were forcing Russia to spend million-dollar interceptor missiles against relatively cheap autonomous strike platforms. The economic asymmetry was devastating. At the same time, mobile internet service across Moscow began shutting down as Russian authorities attempted to reduce drone telemetry signals and civilian panic ahead of the upcoming Victory Day parade. But beneath the surface, something even more dangerous was unfolding. According to Ukrainian intelligence channels, this drone assault was not solely about physical destruction. Its deeper objective was psychological warfare. Victory Day is not just a parade for Russia. It is the symbolic center of modern Russian national identity. A visible security failure days before the event would damage the image of invulnerability carefully projected by the Kremlin, and NATO was watching every second. As the drone attacks intensified, NATO ISR assets immediately surged toward Eastern Europe. RC-135 rivet-joint electronic surveillance aircraft began orbiting near the Baltic region. American Global Hawk drones expanded reconnaissance patterns along the Black Sea. Polish and Romanian airbases quietly elevated readiness conditions. Nobody knew whether this was the beginning of a much larger escalation, because at the same moment Russia was defending its skies, Ukraine was simultaneously striking Russian oil infrastructure deep inside the country. Satellite imagery confirmed renewed fires at the Tuapse oil terminal and additional strikes against Baltic export infrastructure near Primorsk. This was not random targeting. Ukraine appeared to be executing a coordinated strategic interdiction campaign aimed at degrading Russia's fuel exports, military logistics, and domestic confidence all at once. And Moscow's response was immediate. At 0312 hours, Russian Tu-95 strategic bombers reportedly began preparing for retaliatory launch. Operations from Engels Air Base. Long-range Kh-101 cruise missile systems were moved into combat readiness, while Iskander missile brigades near occupied territories elevated to high alert. The battlefield was now entering a dangerous escalation cycle. Meanwhile, along the front lines in eastern Ukraine, Russian glide bombs continued hammering urban areas despite ongoing ceasefire discussions. Ukrainian officials reported dozens of casualties across multiple regions in what became one of the heaviest bombardment periods of the month. And this is where the strategic situation becomes truly terrifying. Military analysts fear both sides are now trapped inside a doctrine of reciprocal escalation. Ukraine increases drone strikes to pressure Russia politically. Russia responds with larger missile barrages. Ukraine retaliates again using deeper penetration drone attacks. Every cycle increases the probability of catastrophic miscalculation. But then came the moment that sent shockwaves. Through NATO command centers. At approximately 04:05 hours, Russian authorities temporarily restricted civilian airspace around Moscow, while additional air defense units were repositioned closer to key government facilities. Western intelligence interpreted this not merely as defensive caution, but as preparation for possible decapitation strike contingencies. In military terms, that changes the entire threat equation. Because once governments begin hardening command infrastructure during active drone raids, the line between symbolic attacks and strategic warfare becomes dangerously thin. And while Russia and Ukraine exchanged fire across thousands of kilometers, another geopolitical pressure point was simultaneously heating up in the Middle East. Iran, Israel, Hezbollah, and U.S. naval forces remained locked in escalating confrontation around the Strait of Hormuz, where nearly 1,500 commercial ships were reportedly affected by regional instability. For NATO planners, this created a nightmare scenario. Two major theaters of instability. Simultaneous drone warfare escalation, global energy routes under pressure, and rising fears that adversaries were studying each other's tactics in real time. Because modern warfare is no longer isolated. Every drone intercepted over Moscow, every electronic warfare pulse emitted over the Baltic, every missile launched near Hormuz is being analyzed, copied, adapted, and weaponized by militaries around the world. The age of localized conflict is ending. Now wars evolve globally in real time. By sunrise, Russian officials claimed most incoming drones had been intercepted. Ukraine, meanwhile, declared the operation a demonstration that Russian territory was no longer untouchable. But beneath the propaganda, one fact became impossible to ignore. The battlefield has fundamentally changed. Cheap autonomous drones are now forcing nuclear powers into billion-dollar defensive reactions. Traditional air superiority is becoming harder to guarantee, and symbolic national events can now be disrupted by swarms launched hundreds of kilometers away. This is not the warfare of 2003. This is not even the warfare of 2022. This is the opening phase of algorithmic attrition warfare. And the most dangerous part? Every major military on Earth is watching this battlefield like a live laboratory. China is watching. Iran is watching. NATO is watching. And somewhere beneath the noise of radar screens and drone propellers, generals around the world are quietly rewriting the doctrine of modern war. Because the next conflict may not begin with tanks crossing borders. It may begin with hundreds of autonomous machines suddenly appearing over a capital city before dawn. And by the time the sirens start, it may already be too late.